Well, good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to see you, and thank you so very much for being here. And welcome to the University of Virginia's third annual Student Oratory Contest. I'm Melody Barnes. I'm Executive Director of the Karsh Institute of Democracy, and my Karsh Institute colleagues and I are thrilled to once again host this event in partnership with Think Again UVA, the Jefferson Literary and Debating Society, the University Democrats, and College Republicans. I'd like to give a very special thank you to Mary Kate Carey, who has been a good friend and collaborator since day one when I walked on the grounds at UVA. She's the director of Think Again UVA, and she conceived of this outstanding event and has devoted so much time and care and attention to it. Additionally, yes. Additionally, I'd like to thank our incredible student finalists for participating in this year's competition. The ability to shape clear and persuasive points is critical to civic participation, and in turn, a healthy and thriving democracy. Being a part of this competition shows that you value robust engagement and are committed to strengthening your own civic habits. Thank you for your investment in our democracy and for reminding all of us, myself included, that democracy takes work and that the work is worth it. Finally, before I hand over the mic, I just have to do one little thing, which is I have to mention Democracy 360. It is the 3-day exploration of democracy hosted by the Karsh Institute, and from now through Saturday, we'll host more than 40 free events and engagement opportunities with a truly outstanding lineup of speakers. If you haven't already registered, I highly encourage you to do so. I just couldn't sit down. My staff wouldn't let me sit down without giving that plug. So now on with the show, and I'd like to invite Mary Kate Carey to the podium to say a few words. Now, Mary Kate really needs no introduction. When I talk to people about UVA, they often say, "Do you know Mary Kate Carey?" But I'm going to do so anyway because it gives me great pleasure. As I said, she's the director of Think Again UVA, and she's an adjunct professor in UVA's Department of Politics, where she teaches classes on political speechwriting, the greatest American political speeches, and the 2020 election. Mary Kate served as a White House speechwriter for President George H.W. Bush from 1989 until early 1992. She authored more than 100 of his presidential addresses. And I can tell you from time in the White House, the speechwriters were always the people that you turned to. The policy people would engage with the speechwriters, and they were just the most brilliant people with an understanding of history, an understanding of the American narrative and global narratives that most people don't have. And all of that is in those brains. Mary Kate has also ghostwritten several books related to President Bush's life and career, and she served as a senior writer for the communications of the 1988 Bush-Quayle presidential campaign. Please join me again in welcoming Mary Kate Carey.
Thank you, Melody. That was really kind. And thanks to the Karsh Institute of Democracy for all the whole team has done to make tonight possible. So, welcome to the annual University of Virginia Student Oratory Contest. You are now part of a great new tradition here at the University of Virginia, and one that we hope will continue for many decades to come. So my name's Mary Kate, and I will be your MC tonight. Melody mentioned Think Again at UVA, and for those of you who are not familiar with it, Think Again is a new initiative on grounds that helps students thrive by promoting free speech, viewpoint diversity, intellectual humility, and critical thinking. I cannot say thank you enough to my team at Think Again, Robin Eiler, Ailsa Bryan, and Juliana Payne, who are our event organizers, as well as our team at the Karsh Institute, Will Thompson, Samyuka Mahadevan, Stephanie Abbott, and Aaron Torr. And we would not be here in the dome room of the Rotunda tonight if it wasn't for the support and great advice of Sherry Winston, who I first met here over 40 years ago, which is mathematically impossible because we're both in our 30s. So please join me in thanking all of them for all their hard work. They have been working with our co-sponsoring organizations to whom we're so grateful: the Jefferson Literary and Debating Society, the University Democrats, the College Republicans, and Middle Grounds. And our main sponsors, as Melody said, are Think Again and the Karsh Institute. And I want to thank all the members of the Karsh Advisory Board who are joining us tonight, as well as the Karshes. And thanks for all your support for everything we're doing. So the fact that this event was almost completely student-run and student-driven from its inception, and to see so many students here tonight cheering on their contestants, says volumes to me about the number of students here on grounds who want to stand up for what they believe. These days, there's a lot of distrust of the institutions surrounding our democracy. I don't know if you saw the new poll numbers that came out today from the Center for Politics, but they're jaw-dropping. And I can understand in a lot of ways why people don't trust what's going on. But we need more good people, ones like these tonight, who have the courage to defend America's greatest asset, which is our democracy. I'd like to thank the many students who entered this year's competition. We had a record number of entries, and encourage those who didn't make it to the finals to try again next year. In fact, we've got 2 contestants tonight who didn't win in previous years and are back as finalists to try again. All of our contestants understand the importance of free speech at the greatest public university in our democracy. And tonight, you will hear many answers to the question, what is the greatest strength of our American democracy? I can guarantee we're all going to learn something from the diversity of responses you're about to hear. And that's what makes this a speechwriter's idea of a good time. So you guys get ready. In the long run, we're looking forward to working with the Karsh Institute to grow this competition in the coming years, and maybe even include other colleges in the Commonwealth, so I'll keep you posted. As for tonight, we have a 5-judge panel. 4 of them are world-class speechwriters. One is potentially one. We have, the 4 have written for former presidents of the United States. So, starting on the left, we have Kyle O'Connor, a UVA alum, go Who's, from 2008, and wrote for President Barack Obama, and he lives here in Charlottesville. Next to him, we have Landon Parvin, who wrote for President Ronald Reagan. He lives here in Charlottesville as well. Sarah DePerry, former writer for President Barack Obama. She's come down from Washington, D.C. tonight. Jared Cooper is from Fort Washington, Maryland. He is last year's winner and a 4th-year government major. And Ed McNally on the end, my colleague writing for former President George H.W. Bush, and he's come in from New York City.
Those are the 4 that are the world class.
Jared's on his way, right? So this year we expanded our prize package so that the winner of tonight's competition, in addition to a $500 prize, will have the opportunity to sit in Jared's seat next year and serve on the panel of judges for the 2024 competition. So our judges will be evaluating the speeches half on the caliber of the writing, half on the quality of the delivery. We will announce a winner this evening shortly after the speeches are finished. And one final word of thanks to all of you in the audience for joining us tonight, because it means a lot to us that you're all here. Contestants, thank you for taking the time to compete and make your best case. And I'm here to tell all 8 of you that this is not a hostile crowd. This is a very friendly audience of good listeners, and we're all here to cheer you on. So let's get started. Our contestants will each give a 5-minute speech, and they will go in alphabetical order by last name. So our first is Ryan Kahn. Ryan is a 4th-year student majoring in Foreign Affairs and American Studies. He comes from Birmingham, Alabama. And just a little fun fact, Ryan came here directly from Richmond, right into the competition, where he's going through the process of qualifying for Officer Candidate School for the United States Navy. So we've got a future naval officer starting us off. So Ryan, take it away.
Good.
That made me sound pretty good. On the night of April 18th, 1775, Paul Revere looked at the steeple of Old North Church and saw 2 lanterns. The all-powerful British Army would soon be landing on the shores of Massachusetts. Undaunted, Paul Revere mounted his horse and accelerated into the darkness. His journey that fateful night would catalyze one of the most fierce and effective mobilizations of dissent the world has ever seen. Predicated upon the ideas of liberty and justice, the American Revolution lit a flame in the heart of mankind, which rages on today. The foundations of American democracy reside in an unwavering commitment to establish freedom for all. Achieving this goal, however, is only possible if individuals show the strength and courage necessary to stand up against transgressions of freedom wherever they may be. Paul Revere and the colonists faced fantastic odds of failure. Yet they steadfastly stood up for the principles they believed in, knowing that their lives were a more than acceptable cost to create a free society. Their descent of tyranny led to one of the most profound political shifts in history. No longer would speech and assembly be suppressed. No longer would any person be denied the opportunity to advocate for their own well-being. It is the fundamental willingness to dissent against injustice which is the greatest strength of our American democracy. Democracy, as a creation of mankind, is necessarily flawed because we, as human beings, are flawed. The beauty of our democracy lies in its acknowledgement of this fact. There is room for error, and there is room for amendments to be made to more accurately reflect the sentiments of 1776. All men are created equal. This phrase drove the revolution and the creation of these United States. The truth, however, is that our early republic did not deliver on this idea. The policies of the United States were determined by a small circle of men who were not representative of all Americans. Women were excluded from political spaces. Black Americans were enslaved in a system explicitly protected by the Constitution, and indigenous populations were horribly mistreated and eradicated. These are not the only instances of injustice in our society, and this unfortunate truth leads many to ask, what good is our democracy? I'll tell you. Our democracy is good because it is malleable. Just as bad actors create bad policies which affect our government for the worse, we have witnessed instances of remarkable bravery where Americans have chosen to fight against injustice at great cost to themselves to create a more free society. The enslaved, who found themselves entrapped in some of the most dehumanizing conditions in the history of mankind, showed ferocious resistance to their oppression. These Americans owed their country nothing. Yet they fought to create a future in which no longer would a person be subjected to violence and terror because of the way they look. When lynchings and racial terrorism swept the Jim Crow South, Ida B. Wells, W.B. Du Bois, and countless other Americans fought at a profound personal risk to themselves to create a future where liberty and justice would be established for all. The fight for liberty and justice for all is not limited to American soil. When fascism descended upon the European continent, young Americans of all creeds volunteered to cross the Atlantic and sacrifice their lives so that others may be free. The United States stood strong in its descent of totalitarianism, which held tens of millions hostage. American democracy, bolstered by people who show an unwavering commitment to freedom and liberty, has guided the world into an era of unprecedented peace and prosperity. Today, 248 years after Paul Revere's ride, the greatest strength of our democracy is the same as it was that day, a willingness to rebel against wrongdoing. Our democracy is a beacon for good, a beacon for change, a beacon for liberty and justice for all. If someone were to say that our democracy is imperfect, I would concur. But if someone were to say that our democracy is not worth fighting for, I dissent.
Thank you, Ryan. We next have Thomas Davies, second year PPL, which is Politics, Philosophy, and Law major, and he's coming from Dallas, Texas. Thomas?
One of my favorite holidays every year is the 4th of July. I love the Texan experience of celebrating with fresh homemade lemonade by a pool or lake, clad in red, white, and blue, as family and friends come together in the name of freedom. And in my opinion, there is no better way to end the night than coming together with a community to enjoy the rampant patriotism and beauty of seeing the fireworks shows, officially sanctioned and unofficial launches, as some patriotic yahoos risk their fingers to add just a little more beauty to the night sky in the name of the United States. Over the last few years, I've been shocked to see a shift in attitudes towards the 4th of July. Every 4th of July, I now see posts come across my Instagram page sharing this incredibly negative narrative about the United States. A message grounded largely in truth, arguing we shouldn't be celebrating a place that's done so many horrible things. So why do we celebrate? Any student of American history will know of these atrocities, tragedies, and crimes. So why do we still celebrate? And why do we still have pride? I was able to answer those questions for myself, and I was happy about that. But I came to realize the true value of this experience wasn't in my initial answer. It was that I was forced to ask the questions. I realized that this experience is a privilege because it made me more secure in my beliefs, in that I had been forced to confront my thoughts, one of my central values, and I'd had to think it through with reason, rather than just pure intuition. And I grew to understand my beliefs better than before. Herein lies the greatest strength of our American democracy. We are constantly set into conflict with ourselves. The constitutional structures of our democracy set our government into conflict. Centuries ago, our founding fathers decided that it was an inspired idea to throw the powers governing the greatest experiment in governance in human history into perpetual conflict with itself. The effect of this decision cannot be understated, not just within the government, but also within our lives. Every citizen of the United States has a personal stake in these conflicts, and thus we're all dragged into the fights, not just between the branches, but within them, as our legislatures, court, and executive branches fight between and within themselves regarding policies that will shape the future of our nation. Even the fight to be elected to those branches. We have a stake in all of it, and so we form our opinions and we launch into conflict with each other. We form different parties and we fight each other. Even within parties, we fight each other about political candidates, policy, priorities. Our entire political system is constantly at war with itself. For many of us, this is scary. We watch arguments on the news and read them online. We fight with our friends and family over phone calls, living room conversations, and dinner. Very few end well. This polarization and discontent leaves us more than just unsettled. It leaves us scared. We shouldn't fear this conflict. We are one of the few states in this world in which this interpersonal conflict is constitutionally protected and designed. As we are empowered with the freedom of speech, press, and petition, we have nothing to fear from conflict, as long as we keep talking. Philosopher after philosopher, from Aristotle to John Stuart Mill to Hegel to Kant to Karl Marx, espouse the virtues of conflict. Only through conflict can we ever hope to achieve truth. If our beliefs are challenged, we are forced to think rationally about them, build an argument in defense for them. In doing so, in learning their opposition, we understand our beliefs better ourselves. Marx, influenced by Hegel, extends this individual thought to all of society. Conflict at a societal level forces new thought, which in turn creates new theory, which forces new experiments, which in turn builds new progress. Look at our history. As a country, we are constantly fighting ourselves. We have never been at peace with ourselves. This polarization is nothing new. Conflict is the reality of this country. And through it, we created progress. The United States of America has progressed faster than any other state in the history of the world. We aren't slowing down. We never will, because we are designed to have conflict. This conflict, these clashes of values, wills, and ideas, this is how we find truth. This is how we create our progress. So long as we keep having the conversation about whatever it is we fight about, we have nothing to fear from conflict. Conflict isn't our weakness or a threat to our well-being or democracy. Conflict is our greatest strength. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Our next contestant is Nahor Hagos, fourth-year cognitive science major from Columbus, Ohio. Nahor?
America's government has been established as one of the world's most, is that like a little? America's government has been established as one of the world's most prominent democracies, but it wasn't the first. The term democracy actually originates from the Greek word demokratia, which comes from the words demos, meaning of the people, and kratos, meaning to rule or to have power. Therefore, when you put both words together, we now realize the meaning of the word democracy, power to the people or the people's power. However, what makes America's democracy different from others is that we actually do not follow the principles of a direct democracy or a democracy, but rather that of a representative democracy, also known as a republic. We do this because our republic elects our representatives. Through our republic, we are ruled under a constitution that protects the rights of man. And through our republic, we have a centralized body of government that controls the nation's affairs. And with the many successes that this republic has, it is through this that our greatest strength to American democracy is actually that we do not rule under a democracy or direct democracy per se, but rather that we rule under a representative democracy, also known as a republic. With the first direct democracy originating in ancient Athens, circa 500 BC, many of the democratic principles that we hold today originate from the Greeks. Some of these include free and fair elections, along with the suffrage and the rights of man. However, our style of government actually follows that more of a republic. We can see this as founding fathers such as John Adams advocated for a republic or representative democracy, similar to that was established under the ancient Roman Empire, which was also established circa 500 BC. And during the first and second constitutional conventions that the founding fathers had, they understood the need of a balanced central government to regulate the country, but also to protect the rights of the people from a potential threat that they faced under the monarchy in Great Britain. And with the democratic Republicans that we know today, such as Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, we understood that they feared a potential tyranny as well. And because of that tyranny that they faced that could happen in the near future, they proposed the Bill of Rights. They proposed it as both a compromise between the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans for an established government, but also as a protection for the rights of people. You see, the Bill of Rights that they established is a reflection of the values that pertain to the republic that we have today. A republic in which man does not need to worry about the potential threats that a majority rule style of government may promote. Because on one hand, we learn that a direct democracy relies on the majority vote or the majority rule to promote change. And although this does not seem like a threat initially, when we refer to the common decisions that we make, as of where to go for dinner with friends or what movie to watch, when it comes to governing a nation, especially when it comes to the smaller margins of victory needed to promote change, that promotion under a direct democracy can promote a sense of mob rule that motivated founding fathers like James Madison to establish the Bill of Rights. The republic established under the Constitution and its elected representatives allowed America to grow and to prosper while giving the country an institutional force that retains a more controlled form of government. And it is through this republic that we established many of the founding fathers' dreams, which are now actually quite a reality. Compared to other countries, we're one of the few republics to have a peaceful transition of power between parties that lasted for over 2 centuries, maintaining peace in the country. It is through our republic that we have also established a successful legislative branch that regulates and prevents hasty change that could crumble our liberty at any moment. And it is through our republic that we have successfully created an executive government, a federal legislative government, and a judicial government that provided a sense of checks and balances to balance the federal power in this country. And it is through our republic that we're able to still thrive as a nation and not face the death that many direct democracies face, but rather remain free and strong in order to form a more perfect union. Thank you.
Thank you, Nahor. We next have Peter Lee Hamilton from Bellevue, Washington. He is a JD MBA student in his final year here at UVA. Peter?
American families. Tonight, I'd like to share with you about two American families, and to be specific, the Kims and the Hamiltons. The Kims' American journey actually begins in the 1950s on the Korean Peninsula. Byung-sup and Won-suk Hong Kim lived in what is now Pyongyang, North Korea. And Byung-sup, because of his political activism against the Communist Party, was actually forced to flee and leave behind his wife and young son as a result of his anti-communist protests. His wife and son, who were left behind, a young baby boy, were actually taken to prison to be questioned about where exactly Byung-sup had gone. Luckily, the baby boy cried and screamed so much that they were moved from prison to house arrest, and Won-suk quickly packed up everything they had and fled across the border to Seoul, South Korea. Won-suk was a woman who knew how to take advantage of an opportunity when it was presented. It was in Seoul, South Korea, where their love for America first began to blossom. Byung-sup was so infatuated, so enamored with the ideas of equality and justice in the civil rights movement, he hosted the first memorial service for Martin Luther King Jr. in Korea after he passed away. And Won-suk, feeling this blossom, looked around Korea, which at the time was the second poorest country in the world, and she said, "This is not the land where my kids will grow up." So she took another opportunity, and she moved to Seattle, Washington. And in that journey of immigration, she wore many hats. She was a janitor, she worked as a factory worker, and most importantly, she was a mother to her 6 kids. But as a result of the immigration process, she was actually separated from her husband and 3 youngest kids for her first 5 years in the United States. Luckily, they were able to join her, and those 6 kids grew up in the United States, some able to pursue an education, some owned gas stations, some ran convenience stores. They'd sleep in cots in the back when they couldn't make it back to their family's small apartments. And those 6 kids gave Won-suk Hong and Byung-sup Kim 16 grandchildren. And Lord willing, in the spring of 2024, 16 for 16 will have graduated from American universities and colleges. From Harvard, from Stanford, from Princeton, from Claremont McKenna, from Carnegie Mellon, from the University of Washington, from Georgetown University, and from many, many more. She dreamed about a life where her family could make it better for themselves, and they did just that, where they now work in law and in finance and in business and in the media and arts as dentists and as family members. The story of the Kims is a story of the American dream. Now, my second story is about the Hamiltons. I'd also like to go back 2 generations to Jim and to Mary, the children of Irish immigrants who grew up in Brooklyn in the 1940s. Mary's father, a farmer by trade, worked as a hotel doorsman. Jim's father was a barman, worked a variety of other jobs that were open to immigrants at that time. They both grew up, and Jim's older brothers served in combat in the Pacific and in Europe during World War II. And when they got married, Jim worked hard as a salesman to provide for his family. And he went to Brooklyn College by night because he thought his son should have a college-educated father. He and Mary raised 4 proud Irish Catholic sons, each of whom became an Eagle Scout. And they raised in them the values of hard work, of discipline, of duty, of self-sacrifice. and the eldest son actually forewent an opportunity to go to an Ivy League college to attend the United States Military Academy at West Point so that his brothers could afford tuition to their colleges. And those 4 sons grew up to graduate from college, to hold positions in business, to get elected to city council, and to raise their own 17 grandkids. If you couldn't tell, those 2 families are my family. My dad is a Hamilton. He's the eldest of the 4. My mom is a Kim. She's the youngest of the 6. And I am incredibly grateful and blessed and humbled and proud to come from these 2 families. So in answering the question, what is the greatest strength of American democracy? A lot of answers come to mind. Is it that we are a meritocracy, where those, when given a shot, can take it? Is it that we are a nation of immigrants that accepts the Byung-sups, the Won-suks, the Jims, and the Marys? Is it that we are founded on the principles of liberty and justice for all that creates that opportunity? Or is it that the fundamental value of our nation is that every human being has dignity and every human being has sovereignty? Those are all important, even necessary parts of what makes America good and strong and great. But the underpinning of those principles, our greatest strength, is the American people who take action to turn those values into reality. It's people who sacrifice in clear ways and humble ways. Those who lay down their lives on the battlefield, and those countless Americans who, through their daily lives, make incremental, tiny, small steps to enact those values in our country. It's when we vote. It's when we show grace and hospitality to our neighbors. It's when we raise strong American families. I can't help but think about the final words of our national anthem: the land of the free and the home of the brave. Our greatest strength doesn't come from just our values and principles, as important as they are. It comes from a people that is free and brave enough to take those values and turn them into reality. It's from the Marys and from the Jims and from the Byung-sups and the Won-suks and everyone here tonight and all of our families who in their daily lives make small decisions, a drop of water that when combined across our great nation forms a wave, a tremendous wave of good and strength and change. I hope that we are a free and brave enough people to continue that mandate, and may God bless us with the strength to be so.
Thank you, Peter. Kellen Narkey from Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, is a 3rd year majoring in political and social thought. Kellen?
In the spring of 1801, the architect of this rotunda became President of the United States. And on the day of his inauguration, he walked to the yet unfinished Capitol building to calm the anxious young country after a vicious election. Jefferson's predecessor, embittered in part because of his loss, did not attend the ceremony. At that moment, it was not yet clear if America, the world's only democracy, would survive. It was facing the ultimate test. Could power be peacefully handed from one faction to another? After taking the oath of office, the new president answered. Jefferson said, "Every difference of opinion is not a difference of principle. We have called by different names, brethren of the same principle. We are all Republicans, We are all Federalists. Jefferson had identified the great strength of American democracy. The principle he references, the peaceful transfer of power, was a blessing largely absent in the old world we had left behind. In fact, some of the first Americans came to this country to escape the turbulence inherent in the violent transfer of power between sovereigns. My own home state of Pennsylvania was founded by Quakers born out of the chaos of the English Civil War. And when their descendants declared our independence, they did away with the old pattern of ferocity and disorder in the transfer of leadership. They ensured that through elections, the will of the people, and not the will of strongest, would decide what direction to take our country. The stability that the peaceful transfer of power has granted us has been paramount to our success as a nation. It is the pillar that upholds our marketplace of ideas and spirit of enterprise. If you look around the world or back to history at less fortunate nations, everywhere that there is despotism or corruption, beneath there is a tragic history of violent power struggles. People in those countries gravitate towards dictators because their spirit has been broken by violent transfers of power. They crave stability, even at the expense of their liberty. But no American hides their beliefs out of fear of reprisals when the next administration comes to power. No American forgoes pursuing their dreams when they anticipate civil strife, when one president is replaced by another. And if an American leader learns that their country has lost faith in their vision or has grown tired of what they're trying so desperately to give, even under that crushing weight of electoral defeat, they concede. That is the great strength of American democracy and the great duty of its leaders. Because of this precious principle, our government uses its power to improve our country, not crush its enemies out of fear of being replaced. American democracy runs to better the lives of the people, not to insulate their overlords. Just because this is our greatest strength does not mean it is inevitable. Only through continuous efforts by all citizens can the peaceful transfer of power persist. But do we take this principle for granted today? Why don't we celebrate the peaceful transfer of power alongside the liberties it protects? Maybe, having seen our friends throughout the world adopt our principle, we have grown complacent. But our enemies are united in their understanding that if they were to knock this pillar down, all other strengths we have would collapse. In the spring of 1801, when the architect of this rotunda walked to the Capitol, he felt the eyes of the world upon him, praying that our principle would fail. We must remember, the eyes of the world are still upon us, but now praying that our principle succeeds. For if there is no peaceful transfer of power in America, then the prospects of democracy everywhere are torn apart. So, every 2 or 4 or 8 years, when the old peacefully gives way to the new, give thanks for our greatest strength, that for a brief moment, we are all Republicans and we are all Democrats. Thank you.
Thank you, Kellen. Next, we have Kyle Ryopel from Richmond, Virginia. He is a first-year graduate student getting a master's in public policy at the Batten School of Leadership and Public Policy. Kyle?
My grandfather never planned on going to college. He was born in Canada, and he was a hockey player. That's what he liked to do. One day, a coach from a school nearby saw him playing and said, "Son, have you ever thought about going to college?" My grandfather passed away a few years ago, and when he was a young man, I don't think in his wildest dreams he would have ever imagined that his grandson would one day be standing in the Rotunda talking about American democracy. But then he went to college, and now here I am. Friends, the greatest strength of our American democracy is public education. Perhaps this wouldn't be true in another system of government, but our republic is not just for the people, it is of the people, and it is by the people. We, the people, have got to know a thing or two about what is going on, and even more importantly, we've got to learn how to make things better. The founders knew this from the very beginning. Thomas Jefferson said, "Above all things, I hope the education of the common people will be attended to." Madison, Adams, Washington, and the rest all said similar things, but is that the kind of country they created? Was American public education truly public? No, it was exclusionary and elitist, and our country suffered for it. But ever since the founders opined on the importance of public education, every successive generation of students has gone further along the path towards making it true. Here at UVA, Isabella Gibbons was enslaved, but that did not stop her from teaching herself to read and write by listening to classes through the other side of a closed door. Her school, the Jefferson School, still stands downtown. And many years later, when UVA was far too slow to co-educate, Virginia Scott had to sue the university to get in, and today we have more women enrolled than men. These pioneers worked hard, harder than they should have had to make education truly public for them. And today, their work is under attack once again by people who would have you believe that the government should be less interested in our education, not more. Some of these denigrators are very loud, but as loud as they are, they're even more wrong. Our public schools are monuments to the idea that there is no better way to uplift a family than by educating its children. Our universities are cathedrals built upon the radical notion that good people actually can make the world a better place, that it actually is worth 4 years of your time to learn with and learn from people who see the world quite differently than you do. And so the crux of the issue is this: how deep is our commitment to public education? How wide are we willing to open our doors? Have we done enough? Have we done enough at this school, whose founder proclaimed that all men were created equal and then proceeded to bar anyone from attending unless they looked just like him? Have we done enough at this school, which has held in one hand America's greatest contradictions and holds now in its other its greatest promise, that people from every corner of the world can learn to live together? I look around and I see that we are working hard, but I urge us not to grow weary, but to redouble our efforts. For nothing less than the American experiment hinges on the success of schools like this one, and the challenges are greater than ever. It's down to us, the people at this school, in this moment, in this room, the students in this room. It's down to us. If our democracy is to one day unite its aspirations in reality, it won't happen by accident. It'll happen in our classrooms. It'll happen in our dorm rooms, in our dining halls. It'll happen in our laboratories and in our libraries, and it'll happen because we have rightly recognized public education as the cornerstone of our democracy, and we have finally acted like it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. From Tazewell, Virginia, Reese Whitaker. And Reese is only third year, but is graduating early this December with a major in government. Reese, here you go.
Good evening, everyone. I promise we're almost done. Thank you all for showing up. I know on behalf of all the contestants and myself and Karsh Institute and Professor Carey that we all deeply, deeply appreciate your attendance here. But now, I want to tell you all a story about a little girl. This little girl loved school about as much as a 10-year-old could. She liked English, hated math and science, but was undecided about history. To her, it was kind of like English. You had to read a lot for both subjects, and she liked to read. She still wasn't sold on it and would prefer a good English lesson as opposed to any history class. Then one day, she sat down for history, ready to take in the information. On the board read, "The American Revolution." She was confused, unsure of what that was, knowing very little of how those 3 words would change her perception of history class. The next few weeks passed, and the girl became an expert on the American Revolution, even discovering that her great-great-great-great-grandfather fought on the Patriots' side. She was mesmerized by it, but more importantly, by the concept of democracy. She couldn't believe that this simple ancient concept changed the trajectory of the 13 colonies so that the great nation, America, could come to be. This love of politics and government, born and bred from the American Revolution, brought her to UVA in hopes of being the change she wants to see in the political world. I hope you guys see where I'm getting at here. That little girl is me. When I think of democracy, I think of this story. But above all else, I think of our public. What is the greatest strength of our American democracy? The people, you. When breaking down the word democracy, we find that the prefix demo means people, and the suffix cressy means to rule in Greek. However, in today's political society, it seems that the public has forgotten this. We have forgotten that we have stood with our democracy through wars, economic devastations, and more recently, a pandemic. We have forgotten that it was people who stood up to their powerful, tyrannical motherland. It was people who fought in wars to keep their freedoms and to fight for others. It is people who elect our representatives, for if they never showed up to the battlefields or the polls, we would not have a nation. People, such a simple word, something we never think of as it just rolls off the tongue. Many of you may argue with me. People, what about checks and balances, our bicameral legislature? To you, I say, we the people. The first 3 words of our Constitution, the words that have never changed and we continue to live by. 3 simple words. These words set ablaze the path for a powerful nation, a nation that others would model from. Our nation. Our founders knew the importance of the people. Why else would those words start our founding document? They simply could have said, the government of the United States of America, but no. We fight for our freedom. We vote for our politics. We, the people. We became a nation because of the lack of rights for the people. Our ancestors fought to be represented, heard, and cared for. American democracy is not just its principles and rules. It is the public. It is not something physical, like a pin we wear on our chest. It is us. We inherit it from the previous generation. We mold it, make it better, then pass it on. Our democracy is not a stagnant entity residing within a 200-year-old document. Our democracy is us and our choices. We give it the power. A people so beautiful and diverse, once known as a melting pot. I say this, yet today we are a country divided. The stew has grown stiff, ingredients not mixing how they used to. Compromise has not been seen for a while. I say that people are the greatest strength because we need them, nay, you, to remember that you are. So we may put these differences behind us and hold together for a bright future and a better tomorrow. A decade later, in this very room, that little girl heard the 66th governor of Virginia, the first African-American governor in United States history, Governor Douglas Wilder, say, "You can make democracy work." If a little girl at the age of 10 with a passion for the American Revolution can take that to heart, I know you can too. Thank you.
Thank you, Reese. And we have Deanna Wilborn from, sorry, I need my glasses, from Jackson, Mississippi, second year considering public health. Deanna? Hopefully we can keep the light going here.
Last one, best one, am I right? My dad recently joined our neighborhood's homeowners association, which we also call HOAs. And I simply don't know how to feel. Betrayed? Ashamed? Does he not remember the 3-year fight over the height of our fences? Or the addition of 2 new stop signs on our street that he chooses to ignore? To see exactly what was going on in my dad's head, I asked him what made him join. He stated, and I quote, "I have allied with our neighbor, Mr. Dale, and we are about to shake things up." I knew that the neighborhood community was about to experience a revolution led by 2 new despots. As amusing and irrelevant as this situation may seem, it demonstrates the major strength of American democracy. The fact that my dad thinks he and Mr. Dale can transform the neighborhood into a new Roman Empire taps directly into American democracy's greatest strength, the go-getter attitude. As philosopher de Tocqueville once said, America's strengths are in its groups. He was amazed that America's democracy wasn't rooted in the power of central government, but rather in the participation of its people. In his country of France, citizens sought reform and improvement directly from their government. Quoting Tocqueville, "In every case, at the head of any new undertaking, where in France you would find the government, in the US you are sure to find an association." Tocqueville saw the founding of many organizations that we support today, including the Red Cross, Salvation Army, and the now iconic YMCA. Sadly, the beloved song wasn't written until 100 years later, but I'm sure he knew that it was fun to stay at the YMCA. Simply put, there is an innate attribute in Americans to go out, start an association, and act together. Maybe this is from our lack of patience, but in my agreement with Tocqueville, I'll credit that to the American go-get-it spirit. This go-getter attitude works hand in hand with our freedom of speech and self-expression. At one of my neighborhood's previous HOA meetings, an older woman made her way to the podium and made a most egregious error, speaking her thoughts. Her passive-aggressive, high-pitched voice shrilly called out, "We need more stop signs on the main road," to which the attending congregation slammed her with some of the most aggressive no's I've ever heard. Poor woman. Afterwards, my dad murmured to me, "Deanna, stupid is not illegal." This older lady had the motivation and freedom to speak her mind. Maybe what she had to say wasn't well received, but her addition of a controversial idea solidified the neighborhood's outlook on future policies. Her participation reaffirmed the way residents wanted their neighborhood to function, while also giving everyone something fun to gossip over at the post-meeting luncheon. We may think such ideas as the elderly woman's don't have a place in society, that they are nonsense, but American democracy is built to hear us and our little silly ideas out. In the HOA scenario, the elderly woman's idea to install more stop signs was a terrible one, through and through. But there was a podium, a dedicated place for her to bring attention to her concerns. American democracy provides a stage for its citizens to argue, debate, and harangue one another on a national scale. One could say our chaos represents instability and controversy to other countries. And while that may be true, it also represents our democracy's constant resilience under pressure. Because we provide a stage where we can let our drama unfold, we haven't experienced 3 violent revolutions like the French have, of which Tocqueville experienced 2. Nor do we live under the guise of democracy, like so many dictatorships and oligarchies do today, the effects of which drastically limit their people's freedoms and access to the modern and informed world. Presently, Wall Street journalist Evan Gershkovich is sitting behind bars in Moscow's notorious Lefortovo prison on fraudulent espionage charges. A few weeks ago marked 6 months of his ongoing imprisonment. The Russian government silences those with different values because it believes they are threats to its stability. They are correct. However, when a country bans opposition from its own people, it is cutting off its own legs. Countries built on suppression of dissent cannot stand on their own. They cannot withstand internal criticism, inadvertently revealing how weak they truly are. To maintain peace and stability, we must make room for chaos and disagreement. The truth is, I'm not sure how my dad plans on shaking things up in my neighborhood. And likewise, it seems people across America share the same uncertainty for our country's leaders as we enter a new presidential election cycle. But knowing Americans' eagerness to act together and in a place that guarantees their group efforts as their inalienable right convinces me that American democracy will live on in its various forms with its many colorful characters. Most importantly, I know that we, the people, will continue to unite our voices as one as we decide the future of our country today. I can only hope that it involves installing no more stop signs. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanna. I am really, really glad I'm not a judge, just want to say. Let's give our judges a few minutes to make their decisions. There's refreshments over on the side, and I'll reconvene everybody in just a few minutes when we hear from the judges. Great job. If I could have your attention, please. The judges have come to a decision. I'd like to, oops, sorry, that's a little loud. I'd like to invite our judges to join me on stage, and I think they're going to each give a brief observation, and then our student member of the judging panel, Jared, will announce our winner. So, Kyle, why don't you start us off?
Thank you all again for doing this. Really impressive. We were saying we would not have been able to do this in college, so I'm very impressed. We heard a lot of great speeches today. We heard humor, we heard great personal stories, we heard persuasive arguments, and it was a very, very tough judging job. I'll pass it off to Landon.
I second that. And there's one thing I would like to say, and that is, information by itself never convinces anyone of anything. It's wrapped up in the person. So I would encourage you in the future, some of you did this, but to let the audience know you. And so that way the audience wants a little piece of you by which they can judge you. And so I think you did great, and I hope you have the confidence to continue doing it.
Everyone's a lot taller than I am. Okay. You guys, that was really remarkable. Kyle's right. I certainly couldn't have done that. And I think what was so impressive was that everybody had terrific just confidence and presence, and that is not an easy thing to learn. And so clearly you all just have that innately. And I would say my sort of overarching observation or maybe piece of advice is, we're often taught in speeches, tell a story, use a quote. And all of that is true and good. It needs to tie to the central point you were trying to make, right? Every speech needs to be about one thing. What is the one thing you want your audience to walk away thinking, doing, feeling, believing? And the story ought to advance that. It's not just a story for the sake of it. And I think most of you guys did that. But just keep that in mind as you're going forward. You know, I'm not just sort of spinning a tale. I want it to advance my overarching argument. I thought you guys did so well, and we all had a really hard time making this decision.
I was tricked because I thought Mary Kate was going to have us in those big chairs where you turn around and then we hit a buzzer and there'd be confetti and then we like coach one of you to greatness. So this is really just not, I came from New York, we do it differently up there. So I echo what my fellow panelists said. You talked about some of the great ideas of our time. Ryan on the intentional malleability of our system. Thomas on the fact that it's designed to have conflict. That was intentional. It's not something we avoid. Nahor about how the founders feared the tyranny of the majority. Peter, the story of the nation of immigrants. I think maybe that is our real superpower, which may be a little different than our democracy and our competitive advantage over other countries that think they are world dominators. Kellen, the peaceful transfer of power, nothing more real or present in our dialogue today than that. It has been our superpower for centuries now. Kyle, on public education, maybe that is the answer to all of this. I mean, of all the things talked about, it has every possibility of that. Reese talking about the people, and then Deanna, we all loved your HOA, shake things up, the whole thing is just great. I do have a challenge to you and your successors, or for those of you who try this again, and it's something really hard and something that almost no one in this room is doing. You are young, you are idealistic, you are passionate. I encourage you to consider being bold and daring and fierce and risk-taking the way the people who created this country were. I can only imagine how hard that is to be on a college campus or anywhere else today. I know a lot of you are here as part of efforts on free speech and campus speech, and I urge you to be daring and to risk being controversial where you can. What was remarkable about the group of you today is that almost always the writing is stronger than the speaking, and you see that again and again in things like this, and all of these were very well written. I may be wrong on my math, I'm not a STEM guy, but I think for either every single one of you or damn near, each of you were graded higher on the way you presented as people, even than your outstanding grades on your writing. So kudos, it's a very strong panel.
Well, there we go.
He gets to announce the winner just like Miss America comes back and crowns the next one.
Well, you know, I can't say anything that hasn't already been said by my distinguished colleagues, and I think there's always a lot of talk of whether or not people meet the moment. And I can say that you all met your moment and that you should be very proud of everything you've accomplished here today. And it's my great pleasure to announce that the winner of the 2023 Student Oratory Competition is Peter Lee Hamilton.
You don't have to do another speech. Yeah, I know.